The air in the gauntlet training deck tasted of ozone and clean metal. The bright white lights made every surface gleam. Captain Lee Soo-jin stood straight in front of the new cadets. 20 young faces stared back at her. They wore simple gray training suits. Some looked eager. Some looked nervous. A few looked like they thought they already knew everything. Soo-jin did not smile. Her face was calm. Her eyes moved over each cadet slowly. She saw the strong ones, like Choi Tae-suk. His arms were crossed over his wide chest. She saw the clever ones, like Yoon Ji-woo, whose eyes were already scanning the room's tech panels. She saw the confident leader, Park Min-ji, standing at the front with a slight tilt to her chin. And she saw the quiet one, Kim Ji-hoon, near the back. He was not looking at her, but at the joints of the training drone standing idle in the center of the room. "This is not a class for heroes," Soo-jin said. Her voice was clear and carried easily in the quiet space. "This is a class for survivors. Your first job is to see. Your second job is to use what you see." She walked to the center of the room. The training drone was a human-shaped machine made of padded metal. It was built to take hits. It stood passive, its red sensor lights dark. "An enemy is a set of forces," she continued. "A direction, a speed, a weight. Your goal is to redirect those forces, not stop them. You cannot stop a charging bull, but you can make it run into a wall." She tapped a control pad on her wrist. The drone's sensors glowed red. It took a fighting stance with smooth, mechanical grace. It was programmed to attack. Soo-jin nodded at it. The drone lunged forward, its arms swinging in a fast punch aimed at her head. The cadets flinched. Soo-jin did not step back. Instead, she stepped forward, inside the punch. Her left hand came up and slapped the drone's wrist, not to block it, but to push its arm just a little wider. At the same time, her right foot hooked behind the drone's leading ankle. She turned her hips. The drone's own charging force did the rest. It tripped over her leg and crashed heavily onto its front on the padded floor. The impact made a loud thud. Soo-jin had moved maybe half a step. Her hands were already back at her sides. The whole thing took less than 2 seconds. A low murmur went through the cadets. She let the drone get up. This time it came in slower, trying to grab her. Soo-jin let its hands almost reach her shoulders. Then she dropped her weight, turned, and used its pulling motion to throw it over her hip. It slammed onto its back. "The wall does not fight the bull," Soo-jin said, breathing normally. "The wall is just there. Be the wall. Use their energy, not your own." She ran the drill a few more times. Each time, she used the drone's attack against itself. A push became a throw. A grab became a joint lock. She never used pure strength. She used angles and timing. When she finished, the drone powered down. She faced the cadets again. Their expressions had changed. Some looked impressed. Some looked thoughtful. Park Min-ji raised her hand. "Captain," she said. Her voice was respectful but firm. "These techniques, they are for close contact, for when you have no other choice. What about proactive control? Dominating the engagement?" Soo-jin looked at Min-ji for a long moment. "To dominate, you must first understand what you are trying to dominate. If you misjudge, your strength becomes your weakness. These techniques are not a last resort. They are the first principle. Control yourself. Then use what the enemy gives you." Min-ji nodded, but the look in her eyes said she did not fully agree. She believed in speed, in power, in winning the fight before it started. Beside her, Tae-suk cracked his knuckles quietly. He liked the idea of being the bull. From the back, Kim Ji-hoon watched Soo-jin's feet. He had noticed something. Every move she made ended with her in balance, ready to move again. She never fought against the drone's force. She joined it, then guided it somewhere else. It was like watching a river change course. Soo-jin announced the drill. "You will be split into random pairs. The scenario is point defense. You must guard a communications relay in the urban training maze for 15 minutes. Other teams will try to take it. Your tools are your training rifles and your minds." The cadets began to talk, moving to form up. Soo-jin walked to the side of the deck, her boots quiet on the floor. She watched them. She saw Minji gathering Taesuk and Jiwoo with a look. A little team within the team. She saw Jihoon standing alone, looking at the layout of the Mock City entrance. She remembered the chaos of Cerberus Station. The noise, the screams, the feeling of being hunted. The textbook tactics had died in the first minute. Only the principles had saved her. See, use what is there. These cadets thought they were playing a game of capture the flag. They thought the drill was about the relay. Sujin knew better. The drill was about the choices you make when you think no one is watching. And she was very good at watching. The assignment screen flashed on the wall. The random team pairings for the point defense drill appeared in bright blue letters. A collective groan and a few cheers went up. The neat idea of working with friends was gone. Cadets scrambled to find their new partners. Park Minji scowled. Her name was next to a cadet from another squad. Someone she didn't know. Choi Taesuk was paired with a quiet girl who looked terrified. Yoon Ji-woo was teamed with a boy who was already talking too fast about strategy. The system had deliberately broken their little group apart. This is stupid, Minji muttered under her breath. How can we learn unit tactics with random people? Maybe that's the point, Ji-woo said, adjusting the strap of her training rifle. The rifles were not real. They fired harmless tracking pulses and marked hits with a sting of light pressure. To adapt, Taesuk just shrugged his big shoulders. He would follow orders, whoever his partner was. Kim Ji-hoon was assigned to a cadet who immediately started planning which corner of the relay room would be best to hide in. Ji-hoon listened quietly, but his eyes kept drifting to the entrance of the urban maze. It was a giant room behind a large door, filled with fake buildings made of light polymer, walkways, and dark alleys. It was meant to feel confusing, like a real city at night. Captain Sujin's voice cut through the chatter. Your scenarios begin in 5 minutes. Enter your assigned start zones. Remember the objective. Protect your relay for 15 minutes. Or try to take another team's relay. The system will track your decisions. The teams moved through the heavy doors into the maze. The light inside was different. It was dim, like twilight. The fake buildings created long shadows. The air was cooler here. Sounds of footsteps and whispers echoed, making it hard to tell where anyone was. Minji, forced to work with her new partner, felt frustration bubble inside her. This was a waste of time. Her partner was cautious, wanting to hunker down and wait. That was a losing strategy. To win, you had to be bold. You had to take control. Her team start zone was on a second-level walkway overlooking a plaza. She could see other cadets moving like ghosts in the gloom below. Then, across the plaza, she saw a single figure moving with a smooth, quiet pace along a ground-level alley. It was Captain Sujin. The instructor was playing too, acting as a roaming element or an observer. She was alone. An idea sparked in Minji's mind. A wild, exciting idea. The real test wasn't guarding some fake relay against another cadet. The real test was right there. What if they could ambush the captain? What if they could show her that proactive control was better than just reacting? It would prove her point. It would be legendary. She found Taesuk and Jiwoo 2 minutes later. Their start zones were close. Their confused partners were nearby. But Minji pulled her 2 friends into a dark doorway. Forget the drill, she whispered, her eyes bright. Look, she pointed a finger. Through a gap between 2 buildings, they could see Sujin moving. The captain was checking a narrow corridor between structures, her back mostly to them. We take her, Minji said. A perfect ambush. 3-on-1. We use the environment just like she said. We show her what real initiative looks like. Taeseok grinned. It was a big, physical challenge. He liked it. Jiwoo bit her lip, thinking, is that allowed? The objective is the relay. The objective is to learn, Minji argued. What will we learn from sitting in a room? This is a chance to test ourselves against the best. We use the tools we have. We hit her fast and hard, like a real enemy would. The plan came together quickly, fueled by Minji's confidence. Jiwoo had a simulation grenade. It was a small orb that would emit a bright flash and a disorienting sound pulse. plus spray paint markers to simulate shrapnel. Minji would take the high position on a fire escape. Tae-suk, the strongest, would charge head-on once the grenade went off. Ji-woo would flank from a side alley with her rifle, ready to stun. The captain with a simulated shot that IT felt brilliant. Felt like real tactics. They did not see Kim Ji-hoon. He had convinced his own partner to stay quiet near their relay. He was curious about the maze's layout. He liked to know how spaces connected. He had climbed a maintenance ladder to a low roof to get a better view. From there, crouched behind a vent, he saw the three of them gathering. He saw their intense whispers. He saw Minji pointing. He followed her finger and saw Captain Soo-jin entering the kill zone. Ji-hoon's mouth went dry. This was not the drill. This was something else. He should call out. He should warn the captain. But a strange feeling froze him. What if this was part of the test? What if they were supposed to intervene? He didn't know the right move. So he stayed hidden, a silent witness on the roof, peering down into the dimly lit corridor where the captain now stood. Apparently unaware, Minji gave the signal. Ji-woo threw the simulation grenade. It sailed in a high arc, beeping softly. It landed at Soo-jin's feet with a solid clink. The world exploded in blinding white light and a sharp, screeching sound that filled the narrow space. A cloud of blue paint dust billowed out. Now! Minji yelled. Tae-suk roared and charged from the front, a massive shape coming out of the light. Ji-woo darted from the side alley, rifle raised. Minji scrambled down the fire escape to join the fight, her own weapon ready. They had ambushed her during the defense drill. They moved with speed and coordination. They were sure they had won. The flash and the bang were tools. They were meant to shock, to blind, to create a small pocket of chaos. Captain Lee Soo-jin had lived inside real chaos. The simulation grenade was a weak echo of it. The moment she heard the soft beep of the device hitting the floor, her body knew what it was. She did not have to think. She turned her head away and closed her eyes to slits a fraction of a second before the detonation. The bright light was a white bloom behind her eyelids. The sound was a loud pop. The paint dust was just colored air. She had been trained for this. She had also learned it the hard way, in places where the grenades were not made of plastic. Her mind did not scream. It became very cold and very clear. They had made 3 critical mistakes already. First, they had used a grenade in a confined space. It was as dangerous to them as to her if they were not perfectly timed. Second, they had announced their attack with a sound. A beep, a warning. Third, and most important, they had ambushed her where she could not easily retreat. A narrow corridor. That meant they wanted to trap her. That also meant they were close. Very close. Her eyes opened as the paint dust swirled. Shapes moved in the blue haze. One big shape was coming straight at her, fast and loud. Tsoi Taeseok. A direct charge. Predictable. Powerful. A second shape was coming from the right side alley. Yoon Yevo. Rifle raised. A shooter trying to pin her. The third? The leader. Park Minji. She would be somewhere controlling the fight. Probably high or coming to finish it. Not here yet. Soo-jin's muscles were loose. Her breathing was steady. The part of her that was a survivor assessed the geometry of the problem. The brute force from the front. The precision threat from the side. The unseen commander. A narrow space with walls. Walls were not traps. They were tools. They could stop movement. They could reflect force. She could not fight them all. Not directly. Not at once. She had to change the math. She had to remove pieces from the board. As Tae-suk's big hands reached for her, she did not back up. Backing up would put her into Ji-woo's line of fire. Instead, she stepped forward, to the left. Her left arm came up not to block his grab but to guide it. Her hand slapped against his outer wrist, pushing his reaching arm just past her body. At the same time, her right foot snapped out in a low, sharp kick. It did not aim for his knee, but for the side of his ankle. It was not a kick to break bone. It was a kick to ruin balance. Tae-suk's own charging speed worked against him. His leg hit her foot and his ankle twisted. He was already leaning forward to grab her. Now he had nothing to stand on. He stumbled, a massive weight going off its tracks. A grunt of surprise exploded from his mouth. Sujin did not stop. Using the hand on his wrist, she pulled down and shoved hard, adding her own small force to his huge momentum. She was not trying to hurt him. She was trying to redirect him, like pushing a falling tree. Tae-suk, now completely off balance, crashed forward, but not toward where Sujin had been. She had moved. He was now hurtling on a new path, directly into the side alley. Directly into the path of Yoon Ji-woo, who was just stepping out. Rifle ready. Ji-woo's eyes went wide. She saw a wall of gray training suit filling her vision. She tried to sidestep, but it was too late. Tae-suk barreled into her. The rifle flew from her hands and clattered against the wall. They both went down in a heavy tangle of limbs, a mess of confusion and shouted curses. The flank was gone. The shooter was neutralized. Two threats had become one problem for each other. This had taken less than 4 seconds. Sujin's eyes were already scanning for the third. Park Min-ji. Where was she? There. On the fire escape, halfway down. Min-ji had seen it all. Her perfect plan was falling apart. Her face showed shock, then a flash of anger. She froze for just a moment, her rifle unsure of its target. In that moment of hesitation, Sujin's instincts mapped the rest of the environment. The walls, the alley, the open plaza behind her. And then she saw it, a reflection, in the polished surface of a control panel on the wall, dulled by paint dust but clear enough. A shape, a face, peering from a dark service hatch in the wall about 3 meters behind her and to the left. It was a cadet, Kim Yi-hoon, watching. Hidden. He was not part of the ambush. His expression in the reflection was not aggression. It was shock. He was a bystander. An unknown variable in a real fight. An unknown variable was a danger. But it could also be a tool. It was all just physics. Levers and forces. She needed a lever. Park Min-ji was now moving again, raising her rifle from the fire escape. She was the last coordinated threat. Sujin could rush her, but that would leave her back exposed to the hatch. To the unknown. Sujin made her decision. It was not about fighting the person in front of her. It was about using what the enemy gave you. And the enemy had given her a hidden cadet. She turned her back on the struggling Tae-suk and Ji-woo. She did not look directly at the hatch where Ji-hoon hid. Instead, she took a sharp step toward it, putting herself closer to his position. Her voice cut through the grunts and chaos, clear, cold, and full of absolute authority. She did not yell. She commanded. Cadet, suppressing fire. Azimuth 215, high. The order was specific. A direction, an elevation. It was a legitimate tactical command. It was also the only tool she had for a piece she could not directly control. In the dark hatch, Kim Ji-hoon jumped. The voice was not a request. It was a wire hooked into his training. His body moved before his mind could argue. He shoved the hatch open, raised his training rifle and pointed it up and to the southwest, just as the numbers meant. He saw Park Min-ji on the fire escape. He pulled the trigger. The rifle whined and sent a stream of harmless tracking pulses toward Min-ji. He did not hit her. He didn't need to. Min-ji, ready to take her shot at Sujin, saw sudden muzzle flashes from a new, unexpected hole in the wall. She ducked behind a metal stair, her shot ruined. Confusion locked her in place. Who was shooting? Where did they come from? Sujin did not look back. She was already moving. She had used one cadet to disable the other trio. The charging force was down. The shooter was suppressed. The leader was confused. The math had changed. The sound of the training rifle died away. For a second, there was only heavy breathing and the rustle of fabric. The blue paint dust began to settle. Park Min-ji crouched behind the metal stair of the fire escape, her heart hammering against her ribs. Shots had come from a hole in the wall. A hidden shooter. Captain Sujin had called for fire. She had an ally. The perfect ambush was now a messy, confusing fight. Anger burned in Min-ji's chest. This was not how it was supposed to go. Down below, Choi Tae-suk pushed himself up from the ground. Yoon Ji-woo was underneath him, trying to wriggle free. Her glasses were crooked. "Get off!" Ji-woo hissed, shoving at his shoulder. Tae-suk rolled to the side, his face red with effort and embarrassment. He stood up, looking around, his big hands clenched into fists. He saw Captain Soo-jin. She was no longer in the middle of the corridor. She was near the wall and she was moving, not toward him but toward the fire escape, toward Minji. He took a step to follow, a low growl in his throat. From the dark service hatch, Kim Ji-hoon stared. He was frozen again, but for a different reason. He had just fired his rifle. He had followed an order without thinking. The shock of the action held him in place. His mind was catching up. He saw Tae-suk getting up. He saw the big cadet turn toward the captain, who was now climbing a pipe on the wall to reach the lower level of the fire escape. Ji-hoon's rifle was still pointed where he had been shooting, at Minji. But Minji was hiding. The new threat was Tae-suk. He should do something. But what? The captain had given him one order. She had not told him what to do next. He was alone in his little hole, a tool that had been used and then set down. Captain Soo-jin pulled herself onto the first metal platform of the fire escape. It was 10 feet off the ground. She did it quietly, using only her arms. She made no sound. Her focus was entirely on the space above her. Where Minji was hiding, Minji heard a faint metallic creak. She peered around the edge of the stair she was behind. She saw nothing on the platform below. Had the captain run away? A flash of hope rose in her. Maybe they had still won by forcing her to retreat. But then a shadow moved. A shape pulled itself smoothly onto the platform, standing up straight. It was Soo-jin. She was now between Minji and the ground. She was also blocking the way down. Minji stood up. Her rifle was in her hands. The captain was right there, only one short flight of metal stairs away. No one else was up here. It was just the two of them. This was her chance. She could still do it. She could take down the captain one-on-one. That would prove everything. "It's just you now," Minji said, her voice tight. She aimed her rifle. Soo-jin looked at her. There was no anger in her face. No smile. No fear. Her eyes were calm, like she was looking at a training dummy. "Is it?" she asked. The question confused Minji. She pushed the confusion aside. She focused on the shot. She squeezed the trigger. Soo-jin moved. She didn't dive to the side. She stepped forward, up the stairs. The tracking pulse from Minji's rifle hissed through the air where Soo-jin's chest had been. Minji tried to adjust, to fire again, but Soo-jin was already too close. The rifle was a weapon for distance. It was useless now. Minji swung the rifle like a club. It was a panic move. Soo-jin caught the weapon's barrel with one hand, her other hand striking Minji's forearm. The hit was precise, on a nerve. Minji's fingers went numb. The rifle clattered out of her grip and fell over the railing, down to the ground below. Minji swung her other fist. Soo-jin leaned back, letting the punch miss. She used Minji's own forward momentum again. As Minji stumbled past her, Soo-jin hooked a foot around Minji's ankle and pushed her shoulder. Minji fell onto the metal platform with a hard thud. The air rushed out of her lungs. Before she could roll over, a knee pressed firmly into her back, not hard enough to hurt, but enough to pin her. One of her arms was pulled up behind her in a controlled hold. She was trapped. She couldn't move. Down in the alley, Tae-suk saw Minji fall. He saw the captain standing over her. A roar of anger burst from him. He forgot about being careful. He forgot about everything except charging the fire escape to help his friend. He started to run toward the ladder. Kim Ji-hoon saw this from his hatch. The big cadet was running. His back was turned. He was not a threat to the captain anymore. He was a threat to the fight. If he got up there, it would be 2-on-1 again. The captain had used Ji-hoon once. Ji-hoon's mind finally clicked. He didn't need an order. He saw the problem. He had a tool. His rifle. He shoved himself out of the hatch, landing on his feet in the corridor. He raised his rifle. His voice came out as a shout, louder than he expected. "Stop! Don't move!" Tae-suk skidded to a halt at the base of the fire escape. He turned. He saw Ji-hoon, the quiet cadet from the back of the class, aiming a rifle at him. Tae-suk's face twisted in confusion and anger. You? What are you doing? The drill is over, Ji-hoon said, his voice shaking a little. He kept the rifle pointed. He didn't know if he could actually shoot another cadet. But he didn't have to. He just had to make Tae-suk stop. Tae-suk looked up at the fire escape. Min-ji was pinned. He looked at Ji-hoon and the rifle. He looked over at Ji-woo, who was finally standing up, brushing dust off her suit. She saw the situation, sighed, and raised her hands. Just stop, Tae-suk, Ji-woo said, her voice tired. It's done. The fight was over. The noise and movement faded. The only sounds were the hum of the facility and Min-ji's ragged breathing on the metal platform above. Captain Soo-jin looked down at the scene. She saw Ji-hoon holding Tae-suk at bay. She saw Ji-woo giving up. She saw the anger and shame on Tae-suk's face. She looked back at Min-ji. Pinned beneath her. Soo-jin did not look victorious. She looked like someone who had just finished a difficult calculation. She slowly released Min-ji's arm and stood up. She took a step back. Min-ji rolled over, sitting up. She didn't try to attack. The fight had left her. She just stared at the metal grating of the platform, her face pale. Captain Soo-jin walked to the edge of the platform. She looked down at Kim Ji-hoon. He was still pointing the rifle, his knuckles white. Their eyes met. You can lower your weapon, cadet, she said, her voice flat. The drill is over. Ji-hoon lowered the rifle. His arms felt heavy. He realized he was trembling, not from fear, but from the sudden rush of everything that had just happened. He had been a hidden watcher. Then he had been a weapon. Now he didn't know what he was. The silence felt heavier than the noise that came before. Captain Soo-jin climbed down from the fire escape. Her movements were the same as they had been in the bright training deck. Calm, controlled, and without waste. She did not look at the cadets as she passed them. She walked to the center of the narrow corridor, now stained with blue paint and scuff marks. Fall in, she said. Her voice was not loud, but it filled the space. The 4 cadets moved. They moved slowly, like their bodies were sore. Park Min-ji came down last, her steps careful on the metal stairs. Her face was a hard mask. Kim Ji-hoon stood near the open service hatch, unsure. Soo-jin's gaze found him and gave a short nod toward the others. He walked over to stand beside Choi Tae-suk and Yoon Ji-woo. Tae-suk would not look at him. Ji-woo stared at her own feet. They formed a rough line in front of the captain. She stood with her hands behind her back, looking at each of them in turn. Her eyes were like stones. There was no anger there. No disappointment. Just assessment. The drill was point defense, she began. Your objective was to protect a communications relay. None of you did that. Your relays are now unguarded. Your partners are alone and confused. You failed the mission. She opened her mouth to speak, but Soo-jin's eyes shifted to her and the words died. You chose a different mission, Soo-jin continued. You, Cadet Park, saw a bigger target. You decided to prove a point. You gathered a team. You used a simulation grenade, a frontal assault, and a flanking maneuver. On paper, it was a good plan. Min-ji blinked, surprised by the words. A flicker of pride tried to rise in her chest. It was also a terrible plan, Soo-jin said, and the flicker died. You used a grenade to start. That told me exactly where you were. You used your strongest piece, she looked at Tae-suk, as a simple hammer. You used your cleverest piece, she looked at Ji-woo. In a predictable flank, you kept yourself separate, to observe and command. You treated me like a problem to be solved with force. You did not treat me like a person who could think. She took a single step closer. In a real combat zone with real weapons, you would all be dead. Your grenade would have stunned your own man in this narrow space. Your flank would have been cut off by simple cover. And your commander, her eyes locked on Min-ji, would have been isolated and eliminated. The truth of it landed on Min-ji like a physical weight. Her shoulders slumped. Soo-jin turned to Tae-suk. Cadet Choi, your strength is an asset, but you let it become your only tool. You charged a target whose position you did not fully see. You became a projectile. I did not defeat you. I redirected you. You defeated Cadet Yoon. Taesuk's face burned with shame. He stared at a spot on the floor between his boots. Cadet Yoon, Sujin said.
Evil flinhet.
You tried to be tactical, but you were predictable. You took the obvious side path. You focused on your rifle and your angle. You did not watch for changes. You became so focused on the plan that you did not see the plan falling apart until it landed on top of you. Jiwoo nodded slowly, her cheeks red. Finally, Sujin looked at Kim Ji-hoon. He stood very still. Cadet Kim, she said. Her tone was different. Not accusing but not praising either. You were an observer. You saw the ambush being set. You did not warn me. You did not intervene. You hid. Ji-hoon felt a cold knot in his stomach. He had known this was coming. Then, when given a direct order, you followed it. Instantly and correctly. Your suppressing fire was not accurate, but it did not need to be. It changed Cadet Park's decision. Took away her advantage. After that, you assessed the new situation. You saw Cadet Choi becoming a renewed threat. You acted on your own to contain him. You used the tool you had to control the field. She paused. But you hesitated at the start. In a real fight, that hesitation could mean death. For you or for an ally. An observer must choose. Stay hidden or commit. You tried to do both until you were forced to choose. Ji-hoon absorbed the words. They were not a comfort. They were a map of his own failure. Sujin stepped back, addressing them all again. You saw this as a game of winning and losing. You lost. But the lesson is not about losing. The lesson is about cost. She pointed at the blue paint on the walls. This was not a fight. It was a demonstration. I used Cadet Park's confidence. I used Cadet Choi's momentum. I used Cadet Yoon's position. I used Cadet Kim's obedience and his later initiative. I used the walls. I used the alarm from your own grenade. I used every mistake you made as a tool for myself. She let that sink in. The air was very still. One lever, she said quietly. One fulcrum. That is all it ever takes. Your job is not to be the strongest hammer. Your job is to find the lever. Today, your mistakes were my levers. In a real fight, you must find your opponent's levers. Their arrogance, their fear, their bad position. Use it. She looked at their young, shaken faces. The confidence they had walked in with was gone. In its place was something more useful, understanding. Return to the debrief room, Captain Sujin said. Her voice was final. The exercise is concluded. She turned and walked out of the corridor, leaving them standing alone in the mess they had made. For a long time, no one spoke. They just stood there, surrounded by the proof of their own choices, learning the hardest lesson of all. How they had lost without ever really being hit. The walk back to the debrief room was the longest walk of their lives. The four cadets moved through the quiet maze, their footsteps the only sound. They did not look at each other. They did not speak. The bright white lights of the main training deck felt like an interrogation when they finally stepped out of the maze door. Other cadets were already there, sitting in their chairs. They were talking quietly, comparing notes on the drill, laughing about close calls. The chatter died as Minji, Taesuk, Jiwoo, and Ji-hoon entered. Everyone could see the blue paint dust on their suits. Everyone could see the looks on their faces. They found for empty seats together, a cruel twist of fate. They sat down. Ji-hoon kept his eyes on the floor in front of him. Taesuk crossed his arms and stared straight ahead at the blank wall. Jiwoo took off her glasses and cleaned them slowly, over and over. Minji sat perfectly still, her back straight, but her eyes were hollow. Captain Sujin stood at the front of the room. She waited for the room to become completely silent. She did not have to wait long. The point defense drill is complete, she announced. Performance data is being processed. Most of you followed the core objective. Some of you showed creative thinking. A few of you forgot the mission entirely. All eyes drifted to the four paint-streaked cadets. Today, an unscheduled event occurred, Sujin continued. Her tone was matter-of-fact, like she was reporting the weather. It will serve as our primary after-action review. She tapped a control pad. A large screen on the wall lit up. It showed a digital map of the urban maze. 4 blue dots were clustered in a corridor. A single red dot was among them. The replay began. It was a top-down simulation, showing their movements as simple icons. They watched the blue dots converge. They saw the red dot Sujin enter the corridor. They saw the flash icon of the simulation grenade. They saw the big blue dot charge forward. They saw it suddenly change direction, colliding with the smaller blue from the side. They saw the third blue dot on the fire escape hesitate. They saw a new, yellow dot appear from a wall Jihoon. They saw it fire at the blue dot on the fire escape. They saw the red dot climb and neutralize that blue dot. They saw the yellow dot move to intercept the first big blue dot on the screen. It looked simple, clean. It looked like a perfect counter-ambush. It looked brilliant. In their chairs. It felt like a public autopsy. Sujin paused the playback. Cadet Park, explain your tactical reasoning for initiating this engagement.
Мені зголовед.
Her mouth was dry. She stood up. Every face in the room was looking at her. I saw an opportunity to test our skills against a superior opponent in a live scenario. Captain. The objective of guarding a relay seemed less valuable than the training value of a direct challenge. You decided the mission parameters were beneath you, Sujin stated, clarifying. I decided to seek a higher value target, Minji corrected, a last spark of defiance in her voice. And you judged the value based on what?
Прийде.
Minji had no answer. She sat back down, her face burning. Cadet Choi, Sujin said. What was your role?
Taiseok stood.
His voice was a low rumble. Frontal assault, Captain. To press the attack and fix the target in place. You were the hammer. Did you consider what would happen if the anvil moved? He blinked. No, Captain. Cadet Yoon. Your role. Jiwoo stood, pushing her glasses up her nose. Flanking shooter. To provide covering fire and limit escape options. You positioned yourself in the only other entrance to the corridor. Predictable move. Did you have a secondary position? No, Captain.
Джадеткімо. Його тенсет.
What was your initial role in this exercise? He stood up slowly. Observer, Captain. I was watching. And when you saw the ambush being set, what was your analysis? He thought of the truth. I wasn't sure if it was part of the test. I hesitated. You remained a neutral element until ordered to act. Then you became an active one. Explain your decision to engage Cadet Choi after the initial order. He was going to re-engage. He was a threat. I had a weapon. It seemed like the way to stop the fight. His words sounded weak to his own ears. Sujin nodded. She gestured for them all to sit. She faced the entire class. The mistakes are clear. Abandoning the primary objective. Underestimating the opponent's awareness. Over-relying on a single, simple plan. Predictable movement. She listed them without emotion. But the real lesson is in the response. She pointed at the frozen screen. The ambush failed in the first 3 seconds. Why? Because Cadet Choi was used as a weapon against Cadet Yoon. Their own force was turned against them. 2 assets became one problem. The math changed. She looked at Minji. You, the commander, were then isolated. Your sniper position became a trap. You were suppressed by unexpected fire from a source you did not account for. Her gaze moved to Jihoon. A bystander was turned into a tool with one order. He then became a new factor, controlling the remaining threat. Sujin paused, letting the sequence settle in the room. This was not magic. It was not superhuman skill. It was the application of principle. See the forces. Use the forces. The confidence was a force. The anger was a force. The hesitation was a force. I used them all. She turned off the screen. The room was left in the bright, plain light. Humanity does not win fights because we are the strongest, she said, her voice lower now. We often are not. We win because we learn to use what is there. A rock, a stick, a misunderstanding, a moment of fear, or one cadet who doesn't know which side he is on. She looked at the four of them one last time. Dismissed. Wash off the paint. Tomorrow's lesson starts at 0600. The class was dismissed. The other cadets filed out, throwing glances at the blue-stained quartet. The four of them sat for a moment longer, the hum of the lights the only sound. They had come into the drill as individuals, then a trio, then a scattered group of failures. Now they were bound together by a shared, brutal lesson. They stood up and walked out, not as friends, but as soldiers who had finally begun to understand the true cost of a fight. The hot water of the showers did not wash away the feeling. It steamed and swirled around them, but the memory of the drill stuck like cold glue to their skin. The four cadets cleaned their training suits in silence, the blue paint staining the sink a pale, cloudy color. Park Min-ji scrubbed hard, her movements sharp and angry. The paint came off the fabric, but the words of the captain would not. Your confidence was a force. I used it. Every rinse made her feel smaller, not cleaner. She had wanted to be seen as a leader, as a bold tactician. Now she had been shown as a predictable fool. The hot water on her face hid the single tear of pure frustration that she quickly wiped away. She was not crying from sadness, but from the shattering of a mirror. The image she had of herself was broken. Choi Tae-suk stood under the water for a long time, letting it pound on his neck and shoulders. He felt stupid, not just embarrassed, but deeply, physically stupid. He had been a bull, a big, loud thing to be pushed around. His strength, the thing he was most proud of, had been useless. Worse, it had been a weapon used against his friend. He kept seeing Ji-woo's surprised face as he crashed into her. He had failed at the one thing he was supposed to be good at, being strong. Now he didn't know what he was. Yoon Ji-woo cleaned her glasses carefully under the tap. Her mind, always racing with plans and angles, was quiet. She had been so clever. She had taken the perfect flanking position. And it had been the exact position the captain expected someone like her to take. She had not been outfought. She had been outthought before she even moved. It was a more humbling defeat than any physical one. She had believed being smart meant being complicated. The captain had shown her that true intelligence was simple. See what is there. Use it. She put her glasses back on. The world looked clearer, and somehow less forgiving. Kim Ji-hoon dressed quickly, his mind still replaying the moments in the corridor. The reflection in the panel. The sound of the captain's voice. The feel of the rifle in his hands. He had been a tool. He had also made a choice. He had pointed his rifle at Tae-suk. He had chosen a side. The hesitation at the start gnawed at him, but the action he finally took felt solid, real. For the first time, he understood that observing was not a passive thing. It was a choice to not act. And choices had consequences. He had been used, but he had also been useful. It was a strange, uncomfortable feeling. They met again in the hallway outside the lockers. It was an awkward meeting. They did not want to be together, but they were bound by the shared experience. They walked toward the mess hall without speaking. The other cadets were eating and talking. The noise filled the large room. When the four of them walked in, a slight hush fell over their section. People looked, then quickly looked away. They were not heroes. They were a cautionary tale. They got their food and sat at an empty table. For a few minutes, the only sound was the clink of utensils on trays. Min-ji was the first to speak. She did not look up from her rice. I got you all into that, she said. Her voice flat. Tae-suk grunted. I charged. I fell for it. I took the obvious flank, Ji-woo added, pushing her food around. Ji-hoon said nothing. He wasn't sure what his part was to confess. Another silence stretched. It was less heavy now. It was just quiet. What she did, Ji-woo said slowly. It wasn't about being better than us. It was about seeing us more clearly than we saw ourselves. Min-ji finally looked up. Her eyes were tired. She saw me as arrogant. She was right. She saw me as a hammer, Tae-suk said. Just a thing to swing. She saw me as someone who follows a plan off a cliff. Ji-woo sighed. They all looked at Ji-hoon. He felt his ears grow warm. She saw me as a piece that was not in play. Then she put me in play.
Minji nodded slowly.
A hard lesson was settling into her, changing its shape from humiliation into knowledge. One lever, one fulcrum. She didn't fight us. She just moved us, like we were parts on a board. It's kind of terrifying, Jiwoo whispered. It's what we have to learn, Minji replied. The leader in her was not dead. It was just being rebuilt on a stronger foundation. Not to be like her, but to think like her, to see the levers. Taesuk frowned, thinking hard. So my strength, it's not about being strong. It's about when and where to be strong. So it can't be used against me. Yes, Jiwoo said, a spark of her old cleverness returning, but sharper now. And my plans need to have back doors, exit points, ways to use it when it goes wrong.
Ihon listened.
He understood something then. The humanity, fuck yeah moment the stories talked about, it wasn't about roaring and winning. It was about this. It was about a quiet woman in a corridor, using a moment of surprise, a stumble, a shout, and a hidden boy to change everything. It was about using what you have, no matter how small, in the exact right way. It was the opposite of glory. It was cold, clean efficiency. He looked at the others at the table. They were not friends. They might never be. But they were no longer just cadets who had failed a drill. They were the first ones in their class to have seen the real face of combat. Not the noise and the fire, but the quiet mind behind it all. Minji picked up her fork. Eat. We start at 0600. They ate. The noise of the mess hall washed over them again. But they were inside a quiet bubble of new understanding. The story of their ambush would be told in whispers for days. Some would laugh. Some would shake their heads. But for these four, the laughter didn't matter. They had learned the only lesson that counted. In any fight, the first thing you must defeat is your own idea of how the fight should go. Captain Lee Soo-jin had broken that idea for them. Now they had to build a new one. And they would. Starting tomorrow.